WADR.
WADR.
West Africa Democracy Radio.
WADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar. Good afternoon and many thanks for tuning into West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on WADR.org. Welcome to Newslink. Let's begin with the headlines. ECOWAS and UK hold talks on deteriorating security situation in West Africa. Thousands of Burkina Faso refugees seek shelter in Côte d'Ivoire amid ongoing violence in the country. UN Special Representative worries over welfare of displaced persons in eastern Mali.
No one can deny that the mission is confronted with challenges. To start with, to operate in a territory as large as Mali in the current security conditions is not an easy task.
And Ghana's consumer inflation drops to 45.0% in March, marking the third consecutive month of slowdown.
Year-on-year inflation for the month of March 2023 was 45.0%, a sharper decline in the rate of change in our inflation rate between February 2023 and March 2023.
Please stay with us for details of these stories and more.
Here is James Adjapong with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining us. We begin in Côte d'Ivoire as over 18,000 Burkina Faso refugees flee to the northern and northeastern part of the country, seeking shelter from the ongoing violence perpetrated by terrorist group in Burkina Faso. The National Security Council, chaired by President Alassane Ouattara on Thursday, issued a statement confirming the increasing influx of refugees into the country. The statement highlighted the dire situation and the devastating impact of the conflict in Burkina Faso, which has forced thousands of people to flee their homes in search of safety. Oge Obierica reports.
The National Security Council, under the direction of the head of state, has established humanitarian aid to assist with the influx of refugees from Burkina Faso. According to a statement, this aid has facilitated the biometric census of 4,235 refugees out of an estimated 18,846 by the UNHCR. Additionally, 2 transit sites in the Ouagadougou and Buna department have been identified for the temporary accommodation of these refugees until they can return to their home country. Considering security aspects, President Alassane Ouattara has instructed the Executive Secretary of the National Security Council to ensure proper coordination of humanitarian interventions at both central and local levels. The UNHCR previously noted that insecurity has resulted in the forced displacement of entire villages due to attacks by jihadist groups, causing people to leave their homes and belongings behind. The agency reports an average of over 100 people crossing the Ivorian border daily.
Oge Obierica filed that report. Moving on to Mali, the United Nations Special Representative of the Secretary General, Gassim Wan, has expressed concern over the welfare of displaced persons in the eastern part of the country. Wan, who recently visited the region, was distressed by the plight of the people he encountered in Menaka. During a press briefing after the meeting at the United Nations headquarters, Wan acknowledged the challenges posed by the ongoing conflict and commended the UN mission in Mali, MINUSMA, for its effort in improving the living conditions of the people. He emphasized the urgent need for immediate action to address the humanitarian crisis in eastern Mali, calling for support and resources to assist those who have been displaced by the conflict. Here is an excerpt of his speech.
No one can deny that the mission is confronted with challenges. To start with, to operate in a territory as large as Mali in the current security conditions is not an easy task. And in actual fact, I think the mere fact that the mission has been able to work and to operate unfailingly since it was deployed back in 2013 speaks volumes about the amount of effort, the commitment, and the flexibility that the mission has demonstrated throughout its decade-long deployment. Second, there is a commendable work being done on the ground in terms of protection of civilians, promotion of reconciliation, social cohesion, promotion of human rights, and so on. But again, as I indicated, our ability to operate depends on the level of cooperation we receive from the Malian authorities. Hence, our continuous engagement with them to create the best possible condition for MINUSMA to fulfill its mandate to the benefit of the Malian people. MINUSMA's role is to support Mali and to support the Malian people, and they have expectations that we will perform to their satisfaction. Obviously, they'll be looking at the options that were put forward, but my feeling is they support the mission to operate in conditions that are more conducive, but we'll see what will be decided in June.
El Gassim One is the United Nations Special Representative of the Secretary General. Let's cross over to Benin as the government announces a special recruitment of 5,000 new soldiers. The majority of these recruits will be stationed in the north of the country where terrorist groups have been active. This initiative, the Beninese government said, demonstrates its commitment to fighting terrorism and increasing its resources to combat these groups. The 5,000 new soldiers will be organized into projection groups of the armed forces after their training and will be immediately deployed to various operational areas. The exact date of their deployment is yet to be determined. Since 2021, northern Benin has seen an increase in attacks by armed terrorist groups, resulting in several deaths within the military ranks.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
If you are just tuning in, this is Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM, and we are also streaming around the world on WADR.org. The sub-regional bloc ECOWAS and the UK government this week held discussions on the deteriorating security situation in West Africa. Representatives from both parties converged at the ECOWAS headquarters in Abuja, Nigeria's capital, for the discussion. Imwedit brings us up to speed on the development.
During a working visit by British Minister of State for the Armed Forces, James Hepe, to the President of the ECOWAS Commission, Omar Aliu Toure, the two officials discussed security matters in the West African region, specifically the situations in Mali, Guinea and Burkina Faso. President Toure emphasized the importance of conducting all interventions within ECOWAS regional framework, which is the plan of action designed to foster coherent and coordinated efforts. Mr. Hepe, in response, assured President Toure of Britain's commitment to collaborating with ECOWAS to promote peace in the region. Recently, insecurity challenges have become widespread in the sub-region, especially in countries such as Burkina Faso, Mali and Guinea, where military coups have resulted from the previous heads of state's inability to control the state's affairs, including insecurity. Terrorist groups have also become increasingly active in the region, including in Benin and Togo. Despite the military government's strategic plans to combat the menace, terrorist groups continue to update and develop new methods to carry out the operations.
Imwedit filed that report. Away from that, the family of the late former Liberian President William R. Tobit, who was assassinated in a military coup on April 12, 1980, along with many others, have urged Liberians to avoid repeating the violent past. The call came from the family members of President Tobit and the victims who lost their lives during the April 12 coup. They expressed their concern and appealed to the citizens to maintain peace and harmony in the country. As Darlington Pokpa in Morovia reports, the military coup was led by former President Samuel Doe, and several people lost their lives as a result of the gruesome incident.
Samuel Kedo was a sergeant in the armed forces of Liberia when he organized and executed the coup on April 12, 1980, killing President William Tubber and several others. Doe accused the Tubber administration of not catering to the well-being of soldiers as well as involving in public corruption. Hence, he ordered the public execution of 13 senior government officials from the Tubber administration without trial. Meanwhile, speaking at the mass graves where the victims were buried, the spokesman of the family, Dr. Richard Tobo, and others called on Liberians never to revert to the ugly past, no matter the level of disenchantments.
More than 2,000 persons who are buried with him here who died on that night at the executive mansion. There are many more who died 10 days later and are also buried here, but today we are particularly remembering those who died on the awful night of April 12, 1980.
There was hope that when this country calmed down the way it did, great things were going to happen. Doors were going to be open. Hunger will go away. What are we experiencing today? There will be no corruption. What are we experiencing today? When you look at the destitution that is going on around us, and you know you have nowhere to go, nobody to ask for help. What is it? Is this life?
For his part, Dr. Eric Osini, former Senate bearer of the True Weak Party, underscored the need for national reconciliation among Liberians as a means of putting behind the bitter pasts.
Hope did not die with Dr. Tobin, but a legacy of what Liberia ought to be was born on that day. So let us live Dr. Tobin's legacy, because with only the total involvement of everyone in Liberia, that Liberia can achieve higher heights. And I will continue to preach that message. I will continue to push that effort, because his life impacted every aspect and every corner of Liberia, no matter where you came from. So let us go from here today knowing this country can rise again from the ashes of violence and death and destruction to an oasis where brotherly love, peacefulness, and prosperity will forever remain.
The April 12, 1980 coup was the beginning of a long chapter that ushered in the decade-long civil war that started on December 25, 1989 by former warlord turned President Charles Taylor. For Newslink on WADR, I am Darlington Pogba reporting from Monrovia.
The Ghana Statistical Service says consumer inflation slowed to 45.0% in annual terms in March from 52.8% in February. This marks the third consecutive month that inflation has slowed since reaching a more than two-decade high of 54.1% in December 2022, which skyrocketed prices of fuel, utilities, and food. Atiawe Nibilo Lawson has the story.
According to government statistician Professor Samuel Kobina Enim, the sharp decline in inflation corresponds with the ongoing downward trend. Without making any promises, Professor Enim said the Statistical Service is hopeful that the trend will be sustained. He further stated that he is confident that the current performance of the local currency could have an indirect role in the declining rate of inflation.
Consumer Price Index for the month of March 2023 stood at 166.6 indices relative to 114.9 that was recorded for the same time March 2022. Given these two price indices, that is 166.6 for March 2023 and 114.9 for March 2022, year-on-year inflation for the month of March 2023 was 45.0%, a sharper decline in the rate of change in our inflation rate between February 2023 and March 2023.
Reacting to this news, economist and research lead at the Ghana Commercial Bank Capital Limited, Courage Boti, says this reduction in inflation in Ghana will lead to sufficient fall in the exchange rate and easing the cost of living expenditure for Ghanaians.
With inflation now on this part of decline, I wouldn't say immediately we'll see policy rate reduction, but you might not expect any more increases at this point in time as they try to anchor inflation to a stable part of decline, really. What that will mean is that over time, you will see interest rates fall sufficiently. And when we get to the point where it warrants a cut in the policy rate, the Ghana reference rate will also respond in that regard. And then you can begin to see cost of credit ease a bit on the market. It also means that the rate at which you see prices increase, which is the headache for most Ghanaians or almost all Ghanaians, those rates are slowing down marginally. And that is a trend we expect will continue into the second half of the year. And so cost of living should ease a bit. That will mean that our lives will be better in the future. future.
Many Ghanaians are hoping this trend of reduction in inflation continues to ease the stress on their finances and increase their purchasing power.
Terry Bella Lawson filed that report. You are listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Here's a reminder of our top stories. ECOWAS and UK hold talks on deteriorating security situation in West Africa. Thousands of Burkina refugees seek shelter in Côte d'Ivoire amidst ongoing violence in the country. UN Special Representative worries over welfare of displaced persons in eastern Mali. And Ghana's consumer inflation drops to 45.0% in March, marking the third consecutive month of slowdown. Still ahead, we have our newspaper review, guest interview, and some sports updates. Kindly stay with us.
You are listening to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal.
If you are just tuning in, this is Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM. We still have more stories here. Stay with us. Before we get to our newspaper review, tragedy struck off the coast of Tunisia as a boat carrying irregular migrants, primarily from sub-Saharan Africa, capsized, leading to the death of 10 people. According to a statement released by Tunisian authorities on Wednesday, 76 others who were attempting to enter Europe illegally were rescued. The authorities expressed their condolences to the families of the victims and reiterated the need for international cooperation to tackle irregular migration and its underlying causes. Sankole Janko completes the story.
Tunisian authorities in a press release on Wednesday said 76 others who sought to reach Europe illegally were also rescued. The Tunisian National Guard has reported that it foiled 2 illegal maritime border crossings on Tuesday, one of Sfax in the south and the other of Kalat, Al-Andalus in the north of the country. A total of 76 migrants from sub-Saharan Africa, along with 4 Tunisians, were rescued and 10 bodies were recovered from a boat that had sunk. Tunisia has experienced a significant increase in irregular migratory flows toward Europe since the beginning of 2022, largely due to economic and political crisis in the country, as well as conflicts in other parts of Africa. The southeast coast of Tunisia is often the site of rescue operations for migrants, and many others have died or gone missing after their boats sank. The Italian government has declared a state of emergency on immigration in an effort to address the growing crisis.
Sankole Janko filed that report.
This is the newspaper review. Stay on top of the news. Get the most important stories with added insight and concise review.
This is the newspaper review.
Up next, we have our press stories from Ghana with WADR's Terry Bella Lawson.
Greetings from Accra, Ghana. Welcome to the newspaper review. Today, Thursday, April 13, 2023. Let's start off the review by looking at the Daily Graphic newspaper. The screaming headline says, "Government throws weight behind Electricity Company of Ghana. The move is necessary for defraying debt-owed power generators." This is regarding the disconnection exercise that the Electricity Company of Ghana is currently engaged in. Let's now bring you some banner headline. "Retrieve steady leave money from lecturer." That's according to the Public Accounts Committee, and it's directing the Bolgatanga Technical University. Another banner headline, "We must entrench fiscal discipline." That's according to Kweku Kwating. Kweku Kwating is the Deputy Minister of Finance. And then the final banner headline, the Daily Graphic newspaper, "Prioritize non-communicable diseases to achieve sustainable development goals." And that is the final banner headline in the Daily Graphic newspaper. Let's now go to the Ghanaian Times newspaper. The screaming headline, "ORC blacklists 2,812 churches and others to remove names from Register of Companies." ORC is the Office of the Registrar of Companies. Then there is some banner headlines. "ECG bus 52 customers recovers 750,000 power theft." That's the Electricity Company of Ghana. Then Ghana Revenue Authority deploys 5,000 tax stamp officers to assist property rate payers to register and pay. And then the final banner headline, UK government stops recruitment of healthcare workers from Ghana and 53 other countries. So those are the headlines in the Ghanaian Times newspaper. Let's now bring you the headlines in the Daily Guide newspaper. The screaming headline, University Don Lord's Education Reforms. A university lecturer at Cape Coast Technical University, Dr. Richmond Yeboah, has commended the government for the great progress made by the country towards accessible, high-quality education in Ghana. So that's the screaming headline in the Daily Guide newspaper. Some banner headlines, Bawumia beats Allen in NPP primaries, according to the survey, and that's regarding the governing New Patriotic Party's presidential primaries, which are coming up later this year. So the headlines in the Daily Guide newspaper. Let's wrap up by looking at business stories, and we're going to take these stories from the Business Analyst newspaper. The screaming headline, government updates stakeholders and investors today. Just a snippet of that. The government will, in the presentation via webcast today, April 13, 2023, to update interested stakeholders on the latest macroeconomic development and the government's guiding principles for the upcoming public debt restructuring. It is therefore encouraging parties interested to attend the presentation via webcast to register, and it has the details of how to register to join this webcast. And then the Office of the Registrar of Companies to strike out names of 2,812 churches and CSOs. And the final banner headline here, take advantage of exchange rate reduction to reduce inflation.
Atemi Bella Lawson, thank you for that newspaper review.
Politics,
analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is The Guest.
On our guest interview this afternoon, we will take a look at the global economy, which is recovering in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. The resultant effects saw non-governmental organizations and the civic space suffer setbacks from the reduction and, in some cases, suspension of funds by donor agencies. However, many managed to wriggle out of the crisis, but with a slowdown in activities. According to Kofi Awiti, a development consultant, donor agencies have also repositioned themselves to make sure that states and communities that need aid actually receive it.
There are several reasons that have contributed to the reduction in the flow of resources, and obviously COVID is a big factor, so therefore resources are redirected into addressing issues that the pandemic brought on us. There has been other crises that resources have been redirected into, including terrorist threats in the desert areas. There have also just been an economic downturn, which means that donors have obviously reduced the extent of resources that are going for overseas development. And there is also the fact that donors are looking now for organizations that are able to manage bigger funds rather than sharing the funds in lots of different pieces to several organizations. So they are looking for much more strategic investment, much more visibility in what the funding can produce, and channeling their resources into managing impact of what the resources that are put into certain specifics are able to show visibility of those impacts.
Does this also mean that most CSOs, especially those in the humanitarian aid sector in the Sahel, may also have to close shops or maybe leave the countries where they have been supporting help because these fundings haven't been coming?
They do not have to close shop. I think one area that is also open as a result of this is collaboration and partnerships. The big international NGOs who are receiving a lot of this funding are also looking for opportunities to work with local organizations and to partner with them and to work hand in hand to deliver results that otherwise they would not be able to deliver alone. So there is still opportunity for partnerships, there are opportunities for collaboration, and there are other opportunities for small grants that all these local non-governmental organizations and community-based organizations should be able to access based on their strengths and their sectoral focus.
Okay. Do you agree with the school of thought that part of the reasons why most governments don't support CSO is because they feel that CSOs don't support them or don't do things, portraying what they have done?
I think that that would be a bit overstretched. I think governments are still supportive of the civil society, and it shows in the extent to which the space is still provided for civil society operations. Civil society is invited on government delegations to attend meetings internationally. Civil society have access to a free working space, except in exceptional cases where there have been confrontation, and confrontation is a part of our whole system. I mean, we cannot pretend that everything is and should be rosy at all times. And there would always be disagreements between government policies and how NGOs, based on the certain perspective, would like to see things evolve. But I think that overall there has been a harmonious coexistence between the governments and the citizens who constitute civil society and the work.
Kofi Awiti is a development consultant. And here is Sankule Janko with some sports updates.
Hello out there, a warm welcome and thank you for joining us. Senegal international Kalidou Koulibaly walked off injured in Chelsea's 2-0 defeat by Real Madrid in the UEFA Champions League on Wednesday night at the Santiago Bernabeu. The Teranga Lions captain was very instrumental against Real Madrid's attacking threat in Chelsea's defense. However, Chelsea went behind after keeper Arrizabalaga pushed away a flick from Vinicius Junior that rolled into the path of Karim Benzema, who tapped to finish. It went from bad to worse for the Londoners when the Senegalese defender Koulibaly was forced to leave the pitch after sustaining an injury. The Premier League club will know the extent of Kalidou's injury after a scan on Thursday. Defender Ben Chilwell was shown a straight red card for denying Rodrigo a goal-scoring chance before Marco Asensio doubled Madrid's lead in the second half. Chelsea will hope to have Kalidou Koulibaly back in time for the reverse fixture next week in Stamford Bridge. Meanwhile, Algeria international Ismail Benassia scored the only goal of the night to help AC Milan beat rivals Napoli 1-0 in the UEFA Champions League quarter-final on Wednesday night. The Algerian midfielder scored at the edge of the area after a superb assist from Brahim Diaz. Napoli's Cameroon international Andre Frank Zambo Anguissa got sent off in the second half and will miss the return leg. Napoli have lost a second successive match without their main man and Nigerian international Victor Osimhen, who missed the first leg after sustaining a tight injury. And that's it for sports. It's back to you.
Thank you, Sankule Janko, for that sports update. We have come to the end of this edition of Newslink from West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to our listeners in the Gambia via Hot 104.3 FM, Banjul, and in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM, Lofa County, and in Ghana on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi. Christian Mukidi has been exceptional on the console. Many thanks to Mustafa Sek for our Facebook live coverage. Do interact with us via social media platforms on Twitter, Instagram at WADR News, and on Facebook, West Africa Democracy Radio English Service. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, it's a rebroadcast of our Environmental program with Abdullahi Hassan. I am James Adjapong. Good afternoon.
News, talk, music, get it all 24 hours on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM Dakar.